All right, welcome back to the BCSN Sports Wrap. Bryan A.D. joined by Dr. Kenyatta Cavil. Bear with me just a minute, fellas. I'm trying to get these last little things taken care of here. You know, my afternoon games weren't as good as my early. Hey, Drew, how about
I
I hit?
Quit while you was ahead.
No, Drew, I hit 4 out of 5, and the one that I didn't hit was really a flyer on the guy from Kansas City, Valdez-Scantling. I figured after he dropped the touchdown, I figured Mahomes would at least throw the brother some love and at least get him one touchdown. He didn't even do that for him. I'm like, man, come on, man. Doc, I'm telling you, if I'd have done that, if I'd have hit that, Doc, I wouldn't be on right now because I'd be at the store getting some champagne right about now. So I'm just.
No, that's right.
I keep it
yeah, we don't need you to keep the champagne bottles too close because Saturday right here. Sound like y'all ready to have a big party.
I'm trying to figure. I'm looking for deals. I'm looking for deals all week. I'm just trying to figure out how many cases I'm coming up to Tallahassee with. But anyway.
Cross the line. Come on over here to Georgia and get some, man.
I may have to. This upcoming Saturday, look at the graphic. There it is. It's the SWAC, the Pepsi SWAC Football Championship presented by GM. Saturday, December 2nd. Kickoff at 3 Central. That's 4 Eastern on ESPN2. The Prairie View Pan. You know what's funny about this game, Doc? And I think I'm the only one of the 3. I might have been the only one. I don't even think you or Mike Washington picked Prairie View to come out of the West. I think I was the lone wolf again, and this time I got it right. At the last couple, I told you the last couple of years I was the lone wolf on FAMU, and I came up short there. But this year I got it right on both sides. So I'm gonna beat my chest all week just to let y'all know. I'm just gonna be that guy. But I don't think it's a coincidence that we get the 2 teams that had the 2 returning quarterbacks. You think about that? Isn't that the case?
Yeah, well, it was 3 returning quarterbacks. Unfortunately, one got hurt.
One got hurt
after the first game that featured one of the teams that you mentioned, which is Prairie View A&M, and then they were facing Texas Southern University. So there were actually 3. Body need to make sure they show him some love. Young man got hurt and stuff like that. But one of the things that I told everybody, and it was amazing to me, because a lot of people focused on FAMU and Texas Southern because of the returning quarterbacks. But nobody really said anything about Trayvon Connolly. And while I certainly could understand, he left some desires in terms of his passing game. But I really knew how he worked out. I really know how his family supports him, particularly his dad. And most importantly, he was a kid that came from a really deep winning program in the state of Texas, Duncanville. And anybody that is familiar with the top 20 some high school rankings, Duncanville has been ranked in that the last 5-6 years. The head coach over there, Samples, finally won a championship for one of the first African Americans in like 20-some years, maybe a little longer, that won it at the highest level. And Texas has went to 6A. Last time it was done at 5A when it was the highest level. So credit to Samples, particularly he did it and took a inner city school before that in Dallas to the championship game and didn't get it done. And then he moved over to the Duncanville and got it done. He had lost a couple of close ones from team out here in Houston. So it was literally these battles between Dallas and Houston for the champions for like 5 years straight. And they had lost like 4. One of them he lost that you probably seen because it's played everywhere, where he lost it on a Hail Mary at the end of the game.
That was his team.
That's
okay.
To Duncanville, the last second, and everybody thought it was off. And they threw in the end zone, and the guy caught the touchdown. So credit to them in terms of that. So Trayvon comes out of that to sum it all up. And so I knew that he would work at a level that would at least put Prairie View in the mix. But I do want to give a shout out to Brian Jenkins Jr. He was a transfer from Alabama A&M. Many people remember him from his father coaching at Bethune-Cookman, your rival over there. I'm sorry, y'all don't like to call rivals. Y'all in these MEAC programs and post-MEAC teams, y'all got a whole definition that I don't need to learn, particularly in this HBCU world in terms of who is
especially when you talk about that school on the beach.
Just because you play a team a lot of times don't mean you're a rival. Just because they close don't mean you're a rival. Don't be fooled.
I can't keep up with these Jenkins. These Jenkins are everywhere. The
right.
one who plays,
his son
seems like he's been in the SWAC for like a decade. And then the coach,
he has did it. But
coach
he
has been coaching for a decade.
And after the Texas Southern Prairie game, I had the responsibility to come give the trophy in terms of that game. And so he reminded me after I gave him the trophy, he said, I told you, he said, you're a Prairie alum. Ain't you supposed to do that? I say, man, I just call it like I see it. But congratulations, because you all did it. I didn't see it. And then at the end of the year, he came search me out on Twitter and said, hey, man, he said, look, I told you we were going to do it. I say, promises made, promises kept. I'm proud. Hashtag. Congratulations. Well done. So shout out to the young man, Bryan. And he was intricate part of what Prairie A&M Panthers were able to get done, even fighting through injuries to do it. So I want to shout him out. Shout out to my nephew, Kenyatta Cavil. Although he didn't play latter part of the year, he was really key in that victory with 2 big-time catches that put him in places to score a touchdown and then lead to the field goal, what ultimately decided the tiebreaker against Alcorn State Braves back in September. So shout out to them and a lot of other men, but those some that just came to mind that it'll be interesting to see how it goes down this Saturday.
All right, let's talk a little. I know there's a couple different angles and that we talked offline about trying to go, but let's start with sort of the history of this SWAC championship game, because even for new folks, you heard anybody who listened earlier, Coach Ferrasi, he and I'm sure he's not the only one who thought that the SWAC championship game was a neutral site game played at Jackson, and because that whole thing brought a lot of eyes into the SWAC. So people will see that the SWAC championship game is in Tallahassee, and they'll be like, why is it in Tallahassee? Why is it being played on a campus? Give a little of background, Doc, on how we came to the SWAC championship game, and then more so the transition from a neutral site to a campus site.
Great question, and I'm glad the question came up because it was a perfect tie-in. It's wild how that happens in regards to how we plan stuff, and somebody naturally puts the question out there, and you're like, hey, we gonna have it on it. So it started in a lot of ways, Dr. James Frank, who now's name is on the building. He was the second commissioner, the longest standing commissioner with a lot of history, but one of the first commissioners to take SWAC to the next level in terms of the leagues across the country, particularly the SWAC and HBCUs, understanding that they needed to have an independent commissioner run the league and all the things that went from it. He was commissioner officially from 1983 to 1998. And the reason I bring him up, because he was the reason and they were looking for expansions. This is the time where you first started seeing expansion, a couple of years after the SEC expanded. Later, the Big 12 expanded, and then everybody, it seems, started seeking expansion in regards to what they did. So at that time, they had Arkansas, Pine Bluff, who was Arkansas A&M, come back to the SWAC. And then you had Alabama A&M joining, which created this unique rival in Alabama that we now recognize between Alabama State and Alabama A&M. As you all know, as FAMU graduates and know the history in terms of SIAC, not only was Alabama State in the SIAC, but Alabama A&M was one of the longest standing members of the SIAC, and they stayed there until 1999 when they decided to move up under the guidance of Dr. James Frank. Well, right after that, there was a commissioner change that took place. Rudy Washington, he was a president of the Black Coaches Association. He came over, and he was a big proponent of expansion. But one of the things he wanted to do with the SWAC was, with this new expansion of 10 members, he wanted to split the teams in 2 divisions, and he had this dream to play a SWAC championship game. It took a year, and in 1999, when those 2 new members were full members, they kicked off and they had the first SWAC championship game. As history would have it, when they started talking about splitting into divisions a couple of years before it, there were several sites, which is one of the next questions that you had buried in it. Where did it go? Well, Louisiana Superdome in New Orleans was a potential site. People may not recall, but at that time, the SWAC office was housed in New Orleans, in the Superdome. And then the Astrodome, that lets you know how far back we're going. There was an Astrodome that was physical. Now we have NRG that took the place of Astrodome. That time you had the Astrodome. At that time, you still had the Georgia Dome in Atlanta as a potential place. Mississippi Veterans Memorial Stadium in Jackson was a potential. So it's intriguing that you asked the question and said maybe it's going to Jackson. It was on the paper as being potential one of the places to host it. Lad People Stadium in Mobile was also another place. And then lastly, which ultimately became not only the home of the SWAC office when he moved there, but also Legion Field. And a lot of that decision was based on finances. Birmingham came hard. Came really hard and wanted the SWAC and what they thought it could do for Birmingham, a very, large African-American region. And so they pushed for it, city officials. So they essentially gave a deal to lease out property, essentially for $1, because they couldn't give it away. They had to give something on it. So they basically put it on $1, and then they gave them, for a while, rent-free facilities of Legion Field, or at least very inexpensive, essentially at no cost. So that was really the talk. Amongst this, as history would have it, at that time, you probably now go back and you realize that there was a lot of talk about further expanding the conference to really try to get to 12, maybe even 14. There was talks about going after FAMU then, going after Tennessee State, going after Tuskegee, going after Atlanta, Morris Brown, as it was still functioning. And that was before Morris Brown took the leap and moved to Division I. But they were supposed to look at parting them, Morris Brown with Clark Atlanta. They had an open office on the table discussing that. Morris Brown and Clark Atlanta looked very hard at it. Morris Brown went as far as moving to Division I. They did it independently, along with Savannah State. As you remember them being independent programs, Morris Brown was short-lived. But with that being said, Morris Brown on paper actually got the votes of the athletic directors at that time. Quietly, the presidents and chancellors of the SWAC were concerned about some financial stuff. Morris Brown never sent over the final financial paperwork, so there was no vote by the SWAC presidents and chancellors. Essentially, if they would have voted, they would have voted no, because they didn't have all the information necessary. And now we know the rest of the history in regards to Morris Brown getting into his financial situation. So that didn't work out. And then many years later now, you have the expansion of the SWAC with FAMU and Bethune-Cookman. But that's a lot of your history in terms of the championship game that was voted on by the SWAC Council of Presidents in February 1999, where you have that following fall year championship game. And the first championship game was a sunny and bright day. I was there. You had fans from all over, much like you see with the Celebration Bowl, wearing all the different paraphernalias of different schools. I remember seeing people with Tennessee State hats on. I remember seeing FAMU hats on, Clark Atlanta, Morris Brown. I remember seeing Miles College, Tuskegee, all around that stadium. It was a beautiful sunny day. And you had two of the biggest brands of the SWAC, Jackson State and Southern, as we entered that era where they seemed to play for championships all the time. They played in the game, and it was a classic game that went down to the wire, with Southern winning the inaugural SWAC championship game in 1999.
Wasn't it even on television? It was on
BET, I believe.
Yeah.
BET at the time, giving some love. That's why you hear a lot of folks still talking about BET. That's when BET was a heavy rotation player of HBCU programs at that time. This was before NBC picked up the lead in regards. This is when the Heritage Bowl was still in existence. It featured the MEAC and SWAC champion, and a little anecdote in terms of that. It was the CIAA and another Division II conference that created a regulation in the NCAA that allowed a championship game to be played at that time for smaller Division I schools, is because all the travel and they had large conferences, they couldn't play everybody, so they have a championship game to play in that. They never used it at the time at the CIAA. Well, the commissioner, Roy Kramer, found that rule because at that time in the NCAA, all the rules counted all the way up. So even though it was a Division III rule, you could use it at Division I or Division II level. That's when they expanded and they end up having the first SEC championship game, which literally changes the role of how we see athletics to this day. Some people still see that as the reason for major expansion beyond the television money of how it went down. But that rule was put on the books by the CIAA. The other thing that's important here, because there was only 10 SWAC schools, the SWAC actually had a violation when they went to the Heritage Bowl. The NCAA spanked the hands of the SWAC because you needed 12 members. Unfortunately, Rudy Washington didn't catch this bylaw, and that ended up being the last year of the Heritage Bowl. Some people blame it on that. Some people blame it on low numbers. Some people blame it on the fact that the MEAC at the time was doing the playoffs and wasn't totally committed to it, but it was probably a little bit of all of that. But one of the things is they pushed so hard at Rudy Washington and did their thing while they slapped the hand and fined the SWAC. They did change the rule. They changed the nomenclature of what a SWAC championship game was called in such a way that it did not count as a postseason game after that. But that first year, it was considered a postseason game. So the SWAC was in trouble because they played two postseason events, the SWAC championship game and the Heritage Bowl in 1999. That's on the books in the history if you really go look at it. Now, your follow-up question is like, well, how things changed? Well, SWAC was in some financial dispositions under Dewar Sharp, unfortunately, at that time. And it moved to Houston, where they had really good crowds, but the price of renting out the facility, because there was no kickbacks and real support from the city or whatever, didn't do enough process to get that done. And both that and the basketball tournament that was held at Toyota, the professional basketball NBA franchise from the Houston Rockets, that the SWAC was essentially going broke. Didn't have any money, couldn't pay dividends back to the schools in terms of that. And so the SWAC presidents actually voted to cancel the SWAC championship game.
I remember that.
It was done.
It was this again, Dr. Cavil?
It was dead.
It was dead. This was right before COVID. And then,
like 2018, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 2018.
And then the coaches, thankfully, the coaches in the league at the time really pushed back and went to the commission and said, no, we need to keep the SWAC championship game. I remember to this day, we were talking about it on our show when we were still in the studio with Charles and Mike. And Charles Bishop came up and he said, man, there's some students, they don't know, young folks that grew up, they don't know anything but a SWAC championship game. And I thought about it. It was about 20 years. I was like, man, you're right. There's some kids that were really born at the start of the SWAC championship, and when they had basically said they were going to cut it off, they were 20 years. They were born and then heading to college. They knew nothing else except for the SWAC played a championship game at the FCS level, unheard of in terms of the FCS level. This was before SIEC ultimately did it, CIAA did it, in terms of lower level leagues outside of the Power 5 conferences, if you would, in terms of the BCS at that time. So it was something that was extremely unique. So there was a lot of sadness when people were hearing that. Again, the coaches for the SWAC pushed back and said they wanted to play the game. So they were going to bring it back. And it was going back to Birmingham. It went to Birmingham, but it was scheduled, and UAB had one of these great years. They had the first rights to the facility. It looked like they were going to host the game because they were winning their division. And so there was going to be a major
correct me if I'm
problem.
wrong.
Charles had just taken over the SWAC or whatever. And when they went in through the process of that, Charles was like, the commissioner, Dr. Charles McCullum, was like, he did not want to play on a field that had all the logos of UABB in the Conference UA Championship game. That's when they decided to move it to campus. It was the best decision financially for the SWAC. Alcorn ended up hosting it. It was a full capacity. ESPN loved the environment because it was a full stadium. It happened to be Southern and Alcorn. And it was electric. Then the financial numbers came in. Alcorn ended up making at least $750,000. Some people said, depending if you put in parking, it was upwards to $1 million in terms of what that looks like. Last 2 years after COVID coming back with Jackson State, they made north of $1 million. So that's when we found out the worth of, if we took it to a neutral site, that a city council or a city that would put in a bid would have to put in north of $1 million to make any sense to take it to a neutral site.
Yeah. The visuals,
Dr. Cavil.
Go ahead, Drew.
I was going to say, Dr. Cavil, going back to that 2018 with UAB and their playoff run, correct me if I'm wrong, that was pre-Progressive Field being completed in Birmingham, which means Legion Field was the only facility in Birmingham at that point in time. Also, am I correct with my timeline?
That's where UAB actually played their own thing. They were still playing at UAB, so you're actually right. There was no Progressive Field. That was the home stadium for UAB, and they were in the playoffs, and they had the first rights. And it was found out that DualShock didn't sign the contract, so there was no legal standing to help support the SWAC in their efforts. So the best thing they could do is push the game to like Friday. But you couldn't have a changeover of the field in time to not have the painting at Legion Field. And that's when the meeting was discovered, and they called back, and the presidents and chancellors agreed to take it to home campus, and found out that it was probably one of the best decisions SWAC ever made.
If I'm not mistaken, that was also the first year UAB program was football program was reinstituted, because they had shut the program down, and
for like a year or two.
For a year, they fought to get it back, and that was the first year. And that first year, they ended up having this great season. No one thought they were going to have a great season coming back after being dead for 2 years. And then these guys get out there and they had like an 8-9 win season. So yeah, I remember all of that was going on at the time.
And the irony of it was they did not host the game that Saturday, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
that was the irony out of all of it.
They lost late in the season, so it didn't fall the way it was. But remember, all this stuff started tracking about with 2 or 3 games left on the season. It became a huge, huge issue for the SWAC.
The attendance had, I don't know what the initial attendance numbers were for that first one. I've seen the video clips of it. It looked like it was a packed stadium, but there was a trend that the
47,621.
The first one.
Still the record.
Which was where?
In Birmingham, Legion Field.
Okay, when it moved
for Southern was the MVP.
So
get 30 was the score.
So what was outside of Legion Field? What years did it move to Houston? And I remember seeing that the numbers in Houston had started trending down.
Yeah, it moved to Houston in 2013. Okay. NRG Stadium. It was 38,000 the first year. Yeah, and let me take this back, because 47 was the best. They did have a 43 year when Southern and Grambling played. But usually in Birmingham, it was 30,000. Then it started trickling down to 20,000.
How did that work?
Some of that was due to weather. During that part of the year in December, sometimes you had some really bad weather. So, for example, in 2009, Prairie in Alabama A&M played. They played in a sleet storm.
Good Lord.
It was horrible. Because I happened to be out there. Everybody from my Prairie team, I had some folks that were working with me in the media at the time. And at the end, when they found out they were going to win, they left and went and wanted to be in the crowd. I was like, no, it's too cold. I'll wait. So I stayed up there until the very end. And then I went in the locker room with the players and Coach Henry Frazier, now Dr. Henry Frazier III, and gave him a cigar. And boy, did we have a blast. We went back to the hotel, and that's when you still had the atrium in Birmingham, where Prairie View happened to have most of the people staying there. And it was literally a party because the folks checked us out the next morning and said, man, we hadn't seen folks party quite like this. And they were happy because they got tipped and made much type of money, big time. But yeah, so yeah, it was closer to that. The last couple of years in Birmingham, to be specific, last 3 years, you had 22,003, 23,004, and then 32,000, which was that infamous Arkansas Pine Bluff Jackson State game. Rest in peace to the quarterback there, but Willie Young, Arkansas Pine Bluff, was the MVP of that matchup where Arkansas Pine Bluff won 24-21. Classically come from behind. The first year they kind of bumped it up. It's odd that Southern Jackson seems to have all these first-year successes. The first year in NRG Stadium in 2013, it was another classic matchup and went down to the wire where Jackson State thought they had caught the winning touchdown, but the guy back of his foot as he catches it going away is literally lands on the end line in the end zone to negate what would have been the tying touchdown, and they lose 34-27, 38,985. Following year was Alcorn and Southern, 38,969. Then it was Alcorn and Grambling, 40,352. That's 2015. That's the first year of the Celebration Bowl, where Alcorn goes and plays North Carolina A&T in that classic game. The following year in 2016, it really dipped. But again, that was another snowstorm, oddly enough. And a lot of it touched on Houston wasn't that bad, but people that were trying to get here from above I-20 couldn't. It basically was frozen in Dallas, frozen. You had flights that were canceled and stuff like that. So it was 24,917, that matchup. But it stayed there in 2017, 24-16. I don't know what that was. It was a rematch, so maybe people just weren't excited about that. By the end, people were really also getting into the Celebration Bowl. And it dips when Southern and Alcorn play that first year. And 2017 was the last year. But again, it wasn't so much in terms of the attendance that drove the fact whether or not to keep it in neutral site. It was more about the fact that the financial cost of keeping it in there in terms of not getting any major kickbacks or subsidies from the city to support it like you have any major event of this size. You put that there. And there were some people in the city of Houston, to give credit, that tried to fight and keep it there and we're going to give more subsidies, but that last minute thing kind of threw it out. At that time, they were also fighting to keep the SWAC office, remove the SWAC office because Dr. Charles McCullum becomes commissioner. He's in Houston, so a lot of folks thought maybe he would just stay in Houston. So a lot of people were pushing, including Houston dignitaries and officials, about moving the SWAC office to Houston, which is interesting. Again, Birmingham stepped up and gave a significant deal, subsidies that included some different spaces and things of that nature, rental of different facilities there to support things. And so it stays, SWAC office stays in Birmingham. And Dr. Charles McCullum moves over there. And ever since I've talked to him, he's loved his experience in Birmingham. And then in 2018 is the first time it goes to a host site, as we alluded to back at the beginning of the conversation.
What's unique about this particular year, the first time that it sort of moves outside of the old traditional SWAC footprint? It's not in Mississippi, not in Houston, not in Alabama. It's as far east. I'll say this: it's as far east as the FAMU Rattlers are going to allow it to go. Being in Tallahassee. You caught that, didn't you, Drew? You caught that?
We can't,
okay.
No SWAC championship on the beach, Bryan.
No, we can't do that. We can't do that. This is about as far east as we're going to allow it to get. But it does make for an interesting opportunity here for the SWAC to grow into a new footprint where, FAMU is FAMU. And I mean, we all understand FAMU is one of the blue bloods, and it's going to draw its own attention. I'm curious about the Prairie View contingent of people that are going to come, because I think that's what makes the environment. I go back to 2018, the first year, and I'll tell you, and Drew, I think we talked about this when we did our end of the year show, like the greatest moment, and I think we even got a good celebration bowl, but the visuals that were captured of Southern and Alcorn. And I don't know, sometimes when the TV production people get the sound right and they get the TV shots right, they do a perfect game that day. I swear, if anybody ever goes back and looks at the game of the SWAC Championship Game in 2018 at Alcorn, it's amazing. It is the sell of why Black college football. That's why. So
right.
I'm hoping that Prairie View is bringing. Doc shaking his head. And that's the challenge.
I mean, but that's a very unique situation from the standpoint that is an old SWAC rivalry between Southern and Alcorn. Okay. And it was just coming off the fact that those teams were playing in some classic matchups against each other, regular season. And this was the time where they started playing. As you just listened, I told you the number of times Southern in the last 4 or 5 years and Alcorn were in the championship game. So those fans were routed up. They have old traditions, but they were used to traveling in that capacity. And usually when they come down there, it's known that Southern is going to take essentially one side of the field. So everybody from Alcorn by de facto, when a lot of times they would have both sides, they squeeze into one side. So it's very unique in that situation. Also, it's a very easy trip, essentially, for those two schools. They are literally, for the longest in SWAC basketball, those two teams were the travel partners. It was not Grambling and Southern, what you see now, when it was just 10 teams prior to that. The travel partner was Southern and Alcorn. And that's because when you made that route, it was very easy to go to Southern and Alcorn, or go to Alcorn and then backtrack and come to Southern in terms of playing those Saturday, Monday, games. So I think it's important to understand that when you start looking at the nature of these rivals in terms of that. I think if you had the unique situation where maybe it was Southern and FAMU, because you're talking about a straight trip, a trip that Southern fans are used to making, know about the arrangements, know all that stuff, and it's different. People can do that. But Prairie View, it's not a lot of folks going to drive down there. They got a couple of buses that are coming down there, but that's not an easy trip. Other than Bethune-Cookman, if you think about it, you have essentially the two furthest teams, maybe Alabama, A&M, and Prairie View. You have essentially the two furthest teams coming into play. So that's a long drive. Then you add in, and this is not to provide disparaging to Tallahassee, but Tallahassee is not an easy place to fly into. You can't get straight trips into Tallahassee, right? There's not a friendly place in terms of financing for a hotel in the Tallahassee. So even if you get there, to get a hotel is one thing, and then the price of the hotel is extremely high. I have friends that travel all the time because they're business folks. That's no different. But Tallahassee wouldn't even honor their points because they didn't have to, because they were selling so many books out. So, it's not a lack of Prairie View folks seeking to get there, but the challenges to make that trip are extremely difficult in terms of this modern era of folks do that. Now, that section that they'll have for Prairie View, it'll be full. They'll come down there and they'll have the band, they'll have that type of pageantry, they'll have the cheerleaders. So all that will be in there in the motion. But no, if you're looking for something like Southern Alcorn, I think that's going to be a major challenge. I think FAMU is in a position that FAMU fans that are celebrating this opportunity, that are not banking on cashing in on the Celebration Bowl, they're going to be in there. And I talked to some family folks around this thing, and their heads in their beds. And I don't blame them, but they have the same issue coming from Houston or Dallas trying to get to Tallahassee. They're not making the trip. They're having watch parties and things of that nature because it's a challenge to get into Tallahassee in terms of flights and range. So they went to homecoming. Some of them doubled down and went to the Florida Classic, but they're not coming back.
Hey, I will say,
you know what I'm saying? And again, this is not to disparage the Rattler fans, FAMU fans, but Tallahassee needs to understand that they got two beautiful state institutions, and they got to grow that city. They need some folks to invest in that area. It's the capital. I hadn't seen a city capital that ain't doing better in terms of more hotel space, and not like they can't sell it out.
No, I think this is the start of. I think this can be the start or the impetus for some changes, because I think eyes will open up after this weekend, and they will see, and they'll be like, "Whoa, we didn't know it was like this." They're like, "We're trying to tell
they're
y'all."
Gonna be like, "We leaving money on the table." Exactly right.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Hey, Mary, that's a 5-hour drive from Atlanta to Tallahassee. That's not an option for a lot of people. You might as well drive the whole way if I got to drive another 5 hours.
Now, I'm flying into Panama City because it's a straight flight from Southwest. And I'd rather take the 2-hour drive over. And I know some other folks are flying in. What's the other Southwest?
Jacksonville.
I was going to say Jacksonville is closer than Atlanta.
Some people are flying in there. It's an hour and it's about the same. But mine, in terms of times of flight, was better. Pricing was pretty much the same, a little cheaper. But I like to fly straight. I don't like sitting in no hour and a half way over. If I'm going to do that, I might as well just go on the road and drive the other 2 hours. So we're going to connect from Houston to Dallas and then go in there, or you're going to connect in Atlanta to go in there. That's what it was.
Yeah. Direct flights into Tallahassee, Charlotte, Atlanta, and Dallas. Those three, because you fly to those hubs. So, like you say, Dr. Cavil, unless you're in one of those three cities, you're not going to fly directly into Tallahassee. And even if you do fly to Tallahassee out of one of those three cities, you're going to pay a premium.
Yep, and you're limited on your time availability when you fly to Tallahassee. Absolutely.
Can I, Doc, we always like talking the financial numbers. One of the things that I was able to get from the SWAC office, and I shared a little bit of this on Wednesday, the past episode of the ONG, but the financial opportunity for FAMU to make non-budgeted revenue on this event is outstanding. And that's why the coaches or athletic directors, programs, they don't want to move to a neutral site. I mean, of course, unless it's a really, really, really good deal, but they really like this format where essentially being the host team, you get all of the benefits. I mean, even when you sell or give tickets to the other team, guess what? They're paying for that. That money is going to the whole school. The whole school controls all the parking, all the concessions. They control everything. And again, we're talking a non-budgeted game. So this is extra money. So, I mean, if we just went with the all-core numbers, I mean, obviously the Jackson State numbers, we don't have that kind of stadium, but the all-core numbers would be comparative, where FAMU could make close to $1 million of non-budgeted money. And then you carry that forward into what you can make in a Celebration Bowl. This is a big financial gain for teams to win and be the best team in the SWAC.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I love the setup. I mean, it rewards the team that plays the best over the year. It's easy. If you want the SWAC Championship Game, win the regular season, have the best record. Right. And you don't have to worry about nothing. And so the team that does that, they deserve all of that. They deserve that opportunity to take that money and that windfall. And it's a celebration in terms of that team culminating with the fans and the culture of rewarding the fans all year long for supporting the team to get them to that point. So you're right. When you're talking about $250,000 to $1 million windfall with that, and FAMU has one of the best licensing things that's out there. So imagine all the additional merchandise you're going to sell with clinching the Eastern Division. If you clinch the SWAC Championship Game, you clinch and go to the Celebration Bowl. All that merchandising, that's official, and that's for everybody out there that you need to buy from the official outlets that are supporting your institution. Let me put that on the record in terms of all your stuff that you're going to wear out there. Buy all that stuff because this goes back and supports the institution. You go to Celebration Bowl and you start at about $1 million. You can get a little more than it. You can get, depending on what you sell on your ticket, a lot. So you're talking about anywhere from $1 million and basically $2 million to almost $2.5 million of unbudgeted money that's going into your program. Now, I just hope whoever sees that understands that a significant part of that needs to go back to athletics, and just as much a significant part of that needs to go into the football program so you can maintain the success.
Yes, preach.
ROI, return on investment. You invested on this. Now you see the reward. Double down.
Yes.
Double down.
Preach, Doc.
And see what happens in regards to what you get done in terms of what happens. We've seen it for 2 years with Jackson State. We've seen it with 2 years prior to that with Alcorn, and you see what it means if you double down. I can tell you now, a lot of Alcorn folks are frustrated because they didn't really double down. They paid off debt in that. We'll see what that means in terms of Jackson. Did they really double down in terms of that? But yes, those are the type of rewards if you got that. And FAMU, for that matter, is on the hunt. And at this point, if you get in there, you host it, you on a 2-year cycle, it seems. So
yeah.
So if you can do it for 2 years, get it done. Now you talking about over a 2-year period, you talking about damn near $5 million.
Where else you gonna do that at?
Yeah, I certainly know you ain't gonna do it in no playoff.
That's a lot of chicken plates.
Yeah, no, we seen that. We've seen that. What other Drew? What was the historical numbers we were looking at? This is actually is it the 11th or is it the 12th time that teams have met again in the SWAC Championship Game, meaning that they played during the regular season, and this is the 12th time since 2010, right?
Yes, since 2010, there have been 11 times that the opponents in the championship game played in the regular season and in the SWAC Championship Game. And I don't know why you making me do this to Dr. Cavil, Bryan, because I brought this up on his show, one of the shows this week, and he looked at me side-eyed then, and he's looking at me side-eyed now, because this stat does not favor Prairie View A&M. But since 2010, in those 11 matchups, the team that won the regular season matchup is 9-2 in the SWAC Championship Game. The two exceptions, 2012, Jackson State defeated UAPB in the regular season. And in 2012, the infamous game where UAPB defeated Jackson State, and they say that's the game that cost Coach Kamaji one of the reasons that Coach Kamaji lost his job at Jackson State.
I would agree with that. It's a significant reason.
Yes. And in 2015, Alcorn won the regular season matchup, and then Grambling won the postseason matchup, the SWAC Championship Game. And I believe that was the first Celebration Bowl, if I do recall correctly, which A&T went on to defeat Grambling in the initial Celebration Bowl.
That's correct, 2017. Yeah, we're just looking to make it 25%. Prairie folks are looking to make it 25%. Then.
Yes, and of course, we're going to get into the the game breakdown later on this week. We've got multiple shows here on the Black College Sports Network, but by inviting you on today, Dr. Cavil, we just kind of wanted to take another look at some of the other ancillary things around the SWAC championship game and everything that surrounds the
well,
SWAC
y'all have an open invitation for Thursday, so you can get in and talk a little more of the X's and O's. Since you shared the time and space here to talk a little bit about the business and the historical footnote, you can come on and pencil in if you can work it into your schedule to come on inside the HBCU Sports Lab on Thursday, and we'll really get into the X's and O's with the crew.
Yes, definitely. But I do want to ask you this, Dr. Cavil. You've been around the SWAC championship game since its infancy.
He even just put it out there. He's right. No road team has ever won the SWAC championship since it went to home field advantage. And again,
4-0 at home.
Yeah, 4-0. So we're just looking to make sure it becomes. We're looking at that 20%. We're just looking at 20%.
But Dr. Cavil, where do you see the SWAC championship game going now? Because 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you would have never envisioned it actually going on someone's campus and it doing the success that it has done since it's been on campus. So where can we take this SWAC championship game? If it goes back to a large city, I think it has to be a city with a dome. Because of the time of the year and with the weather, it has to be a city with people have interest in, and if you start doing that, you kind of start locking out potential destination, which is challenged because you want folks to. That these three destinations. That's Houston, New Orleans, and Atlanta. You talk about a dome.
4 cities, maybe 5 when Nashville comes on board and they dome their stadium. Yes. So you're essentially talking about Atlanta, New Orleans, maybe Nashville, Dallas, and Houston. Atlanta is outside of the market right now. Nashville is outside of the market. Dallas, you can decide whether you want to call it in the market. Obviously, you have the State Fair Classic, but it's outside the general marketplace, if you would, for Texas Southern and Prairie View. So now you're talking about New Orleans and Houston. New Orleans, you're literally talking about the
back-to-back
of the Bayou Classic. I don't know, marketing-wise, that makes sense. It's kind of hard to tell folks to come back in there. New Orleans is always a great place to play. But New Orleans is also a challenge because they don't necessarily give a lot of great rebates because so many people want to go to New Orleans. Mm-hmm. So it's not a inexpensive city to go to. So the last one I kind of see getting in the marketplace that could see the value of it and has had it, and so they see it personally, would be Houston. So depending on the mayor and those kind of things, obviously Houston Harris County Sports Authority, I know over some times they had some interest, but it becomes now about who sees the return on investment. And as I said, essentially wants to put a guaranteed $1 million on the table. Pretty much the starting point, in my opinion.
All right. Anything, Doc, that we left off table that maybe you wanted to share? Anything that we didn't mention?
No, I think we covered it all in regards to really all the good stuff. Great questions that you asked in terms of getting into it. So hopefully everybody was entertained by this information to kind of take them down memory lane for some and for others new information. But I think it's fascinating. The biggest thing next for me is I'll continue to push this. I know that it's not something that the office is necessarily pushing for, but as the time churns and people continue to see the financial benefit of the SWAC and this particular game, it's going to be fascinating to see where we go with expansion as we continue to move forward. Obviously, I continue to talk about getting into that Atlanta market.
Yes, definitely.
Nashville wouldn't be bad either if they can get them to understand what it means to make real money. Talking about rivalry with Tennessee State, obviously you got natural rivalries with Jackson State, even though they may be on the outside looking in for each other. You have Alabama State and Alabama A&M. And then you have the movement that people are talking about in Atlanta, about them buzzing around and looking at a Division I reclassification. So fascinating to see where these roads leads to. As we continue to see conference training at all levels, at some point it will trickle down to us. So it's fascinating to see what that looks like. So to me, that's the real next chapter before we kind of see things continue to move forward.
Definitely. Hey Doc, I know it's not Tuesday, but you got a couple moments to hang around while we go through the semifinal of the BCSN top 5.
Yeah, I always like to see what y'all got in the top 5. Let's get it.
All right, the good old BCSN top 5. We haven't done this in a minute, but the rankings have been happening. So just because you haven't seen them doesn't mean they're not existing. So now, I don't know, Drew. Is this our final?
No, this is our final regular season ranking. We won't do anything until after all the championship games and bowl games. So basically everything will be frozen right now. We know we on the FCS level. We've got 3 teams still that can potentially move. That being Howard, Prairie View, and Florida A&M. And on the Division II level, although you can pretty much chalk up unofficially Benedict as the national champion, the question is, where do Johnson C. Smith and Fort Valley finish with those 2 teams still having a game out there to play against each other?
All right, so this is the end of the regular season, correct?
Correct.
All right, so what do we have first, the mid-major or the non-division one?
Yeah, and right now we're just going to do the top 5 right now. When we come out with the final one, we'll do the quote in the hunt or the second 5. We'll let those out, but these are the 5 that are on the list as of right now.
End of the regular season, top 5. Number 5 is Fort Valley State. Ended the season 7-3, 6-2 in conference play. Number 4 is Florida Memorial. Great season, winning record in the Sun Conference, 6-4 total, 5-2. Congrats to Florida Memorial. Number 3, Virginia State. Interesting. Finished 8-2, 6-2 in conference, as well as the Northern Division. Number 2 would be Virginia Union. Finished the regular season 9-1, went on to win the CIAA championship, lost in the first or opening round at Kutztown, Pennsylvania in the playoffs. And number 1, the Benedict Tigers finished 11-0 in total, SIC champions. Of course, they finished their regular season 11-1. Only loss coming yesterday to Lenoir-Rhyne. There's Virginia Union at 2 in their final record, another 10-win season. Well, actually, I think this is the first 10-win season. I think last year they finished 9-3 last year. So
correct.
Virginia State, Florida Memorial, and Fort Valley State rounding out the top 5 from 3 different conferences. All right.
Man,
so
I like that. I was a little indifferent about the Florida Memorial. I didn't have them that high, but obviously you all do a strength component to that, so I certainly understand where that's fitting at. But I like, and it pretty played out. When you look at just the records and teams that made the playoffs, it made it pretty clean. So with most of that, I agree with. I think I have Johnson C. Smith that snuck into my top 5. And that's about the only thing we see different in terms of who's in and out of the top 5 between Florida Memorial and Johnson C. Smith. One thing, before you break it down further, that is fascinating to me, wouldn't you love to see a Benedict Tigers versus Virginia Union Panthers matchup? And no, for Division II, I understand that there's a lot of pride in terms of them going to the playoffs. I think the way it sets up, it's good for them to go to the playoffs. The money on the other side is not there yet, and so they don't have to worry about answer that question. But it would be fascinating to see a matchup where you see Benedict Tigers and Virginia Union playing in like the quarterfinals of a matchup. I guess this year, since they were in different divisions, even if it was, second round type matchup, that would be cool. This year, obviously, they would have to basically match up in a quarterfinals or a championship.
Semifinal.
Or a championship.
Yeah, it would have been a semifinal. Yeah. Hell, Dr. Cavil, I'd be happy to see a matchup of the previous two champions in week 0 like they tried to pull off this particular year.
Wow, exactly. See, that's where I was going to go.
Now, there's a real possibility that can happen. My understanding that the NCAA, that there are a lot of different presidents and ADs that are pushing that week 0, not just SIAC and CIAA, which is likely going to benefit them. And I wouldn't be surprised if it passes this all season so they can start it up next year. So you're right. That would be fascinating to see things kick off with this week 0 matchup in the CIAA SIAC. Now, my question for you, where would the game be played?
Honestly, I would like to see a game like that possibly in Charlotte.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to see that in Charlotte because
between both schools. Let's see.
Yeah.
Richmond and South Carolina. Yeah, I guess North Carolina sits in between, doesn't it?
It's pretty close. Pretty close. It has a lot of rich history in terms of HBCUs in that area. So you
got an NFL stadium.
Yep. Really nice stadium opportunities there. But even though I would like to see it played in a soccer type friendly stadium. So if you sold out upwards to 20 some thousand, that you really get an intimate feel in terms of what it looks like for the camera.
Yeah, definitely. Isn't there a MLS team in the Carolinas also?
Yes, they just have one. I know, and I think they're building a stadium for it. I don't think they built it yet.
They haven't built
state of art stadium, I should say. They obviously play in their own current stadium.
Correct. But I think that would be great, especially with the sale of the suites and everything else. That pretty much nowadays, if you're going to have a classic, you want to be able to sell the suites because for us, I won't say us, but some of y'all uppity now. Y'all don't like sitting in the bleachers anymore. Y'all need to have the suites and everything. So
I agree,
and that's all the business deals.
I believe in the suite life. I'm at Prairie. I am the owner of a suite. 228 #suite life 228. I will not hide it. I feel it. So yes, I celebrate it. I do well in life, and I'm put myself in a position that I can have a suite with friends and colleagues.
There you go.
And that's what I will do. So yes, the modern framework of fans are suite induced people. So if that's what it is, you market towards that.
And the social spaces, as they call
them. Sports escalator. Find your fans wherever they are and make ticket prices and availability for all those different people, however they want to watch.
Let's get to this FCS.
All right, here we go. Over on the FCS side, Division I, our top 5 starts with number 5, Tennessee State, ends their season 6-5, 2-4 in conference play. I think they lose their final 3 regular season games. Right.
They did.
That's a tough end to the season for Tennessee. Still an improvement from last year, but not what everyone thought it would be. Alabama State finishes at number 4, thanks in part to the win against Tuskegee. They finished 7-4, 5-3. Number 3 is Howard. The Bison finish as the MEAC champions, 6-5, 4-1 in conference play. Heading to Atlanta. Number 2 finished their season Saturday. North Carolina Central, 9-3, 4-1. Great season, great career for Davius Richard. And number 1, playing in this week's SWAC Championship Game, Florida A&M First 10-win season since 1999, and they're not done. So there's your top 5 at the end of the regular season: Florida A&M, North Carolina Central, Howard, Alabama State, Tennessee State. What's interesting is outside of FAMU, Alabama State, Alcorn, and Jackson State all finished 7-4, right? Alabama State, let me see. Who did Alcorn end up beating? Didn't Alcorn beat Alabama State?
Yes.
Yes.
Did Alcorn beat Jackson State?
Yes.
No.
And Alabama State beat Jackson State. Alabama State beat Jackson State.
Correct.
That's what I find. I think that's where I was going with what's interesting about this, if I could add my little
this one is the real interesting. Y'all need to go check your data entry points. You need to go check your computers because this is off. This is a major problem here. I do not understand. See, y'all, now I understand that you are rattlers and y'all
computers, not
us. No, let me have my moment because I'm going. Y'all killing Prairie if you don't send no fans. I know we might have 5 fans in the stands, but who gives a damn? At some point, it's what played on the field. Who other than FAMU? Tell me the team between FAMU and Howard. Who are the team that has won their last 3 games of the season? What Division I FCS program? Riddle me this.
I guess I'm just gonna take a educated guess and say it's Prairie View.
Yeah, it's one of the last 3 teams standing that you're talking about. Good Lord. You got a Tennessee State team that has lost its last 3 games.
They built up such a big lead.
Lost to Prairie View. You know, did y'all see that Prairie View did y'all put that in the book that they played each other?
But Dr. Cavil,
y'all like to talk about strength of schedules. Prairie View didn't play any Division II team. Alabama State played 2. Got beat by one of them.
Drew, we gotta go.
No. Sometimes you just need to be quiet. Take your list.
Dr. Cavil, all I'm going to say is some of the points that you bring up are valid and may when we go back for looking for adjustments for the algorithm for 2024 or ways that we need to figure out how to adjust the algorithm for things such as trends, 3 in a row, 4 in a row, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Winning streaks.
And
winning streaks. Also,
but the computer does not take it head to head, but it does take it that strength of schedule, and
I don't know how Alabama State strength of schedule is stronger than Prairie View. They got an SMU team that's playing for a championship on the schedule.
See, this is where
one of the teams they played in non-conference had a 500 record, and the other one had a winning record.
I trust the computer to get it right at the top. I can't. Right. I don't know what the computer is doing. I don't know what the computer is doing outside of the top 2 teams. Outside of that, the computer is doing its own thing.
I'll take that. That's a good answer. But I was looking over the record today because so many people, want other things. But in terms of 2 teams playing for a championship, somebody was looking at the case and saying, hey, so they change it where it's about the top 2 teams and not the top 2 in each division. So I was like, yeah, I can see where you could make that argument. Particularly the last 2 years, it was easy to see the top 2 teams with Jackson and FAMU. But that's why I think you have to be careful to make rush decisions. A lot of the way that is made is because of travel concerns. But this year, if you had that model, guess who would have been the second team represented in the conference?
Would it still have been Prairie View?
Who?
Yeah, still been Prairie View.
Oh, okay.
Remember, Alabama State finished the season at 5-3 because of their last game. They lost to Prairie View.
That's correct.
Yeah,
tiebreaker.
Jackson State finished the season at what?
5-3.
5-3.
Tiebreaker.
Right. Southern finished the season at
5-3.
Hey Doc, I'm on your side.
5-3.
Remember, I picked.
So
I'm
the two
I'm the lone
teams
wolf
that
that
were
picked
up there were
Prairie.
Prairie View and Alcorn, 6-2, and who won the
Tiebreaker.
tiebreaker?
Hey, look,
Prairie. So
I
Prairie
picked
View would have been the second team, regardless if you're doing divisions or not. I just thought I'd put that out there. Just make sure people to understand that Prairie View certainly earned their trip. Now, what happens
Yes,
in the
they
game,
did.
that's beside the point. I think FAMU has shown clearly that they're the best team, HBCU, but that's why you play the game. We even seen that in the MEAC between Howard and North Carolina Central. I think people still to this day will feel that North Carolina Central was a better team, but that day, Howard got it done and put something on North Carolina Central in terms of getting it done. And they checked their bid to go to the Celebration Bowl. The rest is history.
And I got to respond to you. Look, EA. Let me tell you a couple things. One, stop beating up our intern. Okay, the intern missed the thing on the logos on page 5. Okay, so the intern alone. Drop the ball on the. They got it right on the.
They only make it minimum wage.
Now they're not even making that. So, so just relax. And then also, yes, it is the same computer that awarded FAMU a national title in 2019. It awarded Jackson State a national title in 2021. So there. Okay.
So I'm gonna make sure that I make this fight evenly. How is North Carolina Central ahead of Howard? Particularly after not only you got the head-to-head that y'all say y'all don't count, which you got to go back and fix that. And North Carolina Central lost their last game. Now, obviously, there was injuries involved, so if you take that in, I understand. But Richmond did put up 49 points.
And I could answer that.
So in 3 weeks,
on some of the doubles behind,
North Carolina Central's defense has given up 49.5 points.
But it does although it does factor in that the reason Central is ahead is because of Central's non-conference schedule and the fact that they went 5-1 in non-conference play, whereas Howard, I believe, what was it, 2-4?
I agree with that. But I'm talking about at the end of the season. Y'all don't wait towards the end of the season.
But once again, remember that trend factor is not recognized by the computer.
I know.
All games
I'm saying you all need to add that. Y'all need to add that. Self-correction. When you know more, you do more. When you know better, you do better. I'm giving you information such that you know better so you can go back to the computers and correct the error of your ways.
But you know what this is doing, Dr. Cavil? This makes for a great podcast because this gives us something to discuss when we do this. Just like we break your poll apart, you break my Mac apart.
Great work that you're doing. Great work that you're doing. I keep y'all because of care, because I know y'all laugh at it and work on it. But no, those are the only things I've seen in the poll. But overall, I've enjoyed week to week the poll breakdown, and I think there is a lot of good information that you all put out there in terms of doing this different. Instead of the people voting on it, you put an algorithm to it, which takes up a lot more of that personal deviation. So I do appreciate it.
All right. We appreciate you, Doc. Thanks for your
Doesn't
time
mean
tonight.
it can't get better.
No, it can get better. Yes, it can. Yes, it can. We'll work on it. We'll work on it. Maybe we'll fix my basketball team. Homework assignment, exactly. All right. Make sure you guys check out Tuesday night. Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Tuesday night, 7 Eastern, 6 Central. That's Tuesday and Thursday. And that's where you can find him, Charles, and Mike. And so we'll hopefully see everybody all in the building, and we'll see what happens from there.
And we'll catch up with everybody in Tallahassee hopefully this weekend also. Yes,
hopefully so. Hopefully we'll see everybody in Tallahassee. That'll be good.
Bring your rain jackets.
Yeah, that's what I'm starting to see. I'm starting to see people talk about that in the chats that I might have to bring my little poncho or something, man. Just like Tallahassee, the weather be an issue. But anyway.
I'll be in the media booth, so I ain't got to worry about it. I just got to get there.
Yeah,
Nah,
well,
he gonna see how he just.
I know
Talk
that's
about
true.
me and my suite.
That's true. Drew knows that media buys can't hold but 8 people, so I mean he knows he'll be up there. Jeez Louise, but we'll see. I was well I'll talk offline. Hopefully some of my suggestions help out our fellow brethren, our media brethren this upcoming weekend.
Let me know.
Yeah, I'll let you know. All right, Doc. Thanks for your time tonight.
All right, good. Y'all take care.
Yes, sir. Be well.
Appreciate you.